Gonzatti and our Board of Trustees, and we actually have George Ciparone, a member of our Board of Trustees, here. I want to welcome everybody to this amazing event. It is an absolute privilege and honor to be able to host this event for the community. And I want to thank Fred Brewington and the Corridor Cast for putting on this event. And I want to wish all the candidates an excellent and a great evening today, and best of luck. So I'm going to pass this off to Fred Brewington.
Good evening. Oh, come on, we can do better than that. Good evening. Let me tell you that we are here to do something that's never been done before. A major discussion in the corridor. And we know what the corridor is. At one time, it was a pejorative. It was a name that referred to the black and brown communities in central Nassau that wasn't meaning anything to anybody. They weren't getting good representation, they weren't getting good money, and they certainly weren't being heard. But we're here to say TCC. Say it with me. The corridor counts. TCC. The corridor counts. And what we're doing this evening is bringing you 3 candidates. Before it was 4, one person did not qualify. But we have 3 candidates who are stellar candidates, who are vying for the 6th senatorial seat in the New York State Senate. And what I'm going to ask you to do now is welcome our moderator, Razmia Zattar, who is the executive director of Strong, who is a fighter and has been in the areas of civil rights for a long, long time. She is going to serve as our moderator this evening to make sure we get our program going forward, and she'll make some introductions. So at this time, I'm going to ask, will the corridor please welcome Razmia Zattar.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I want to thank everybody for coming out this evening. I want to I really appreciate everybody acknowledging the importance of this evening, the importance of this race, and the importance of making sure that the corridor's voice counts, right? So without further ado, I'm going to ask our candidates to come on forward. So Governor Patterson is one of our hosts. As you heard, he's 2 minutes away. In the meantime, I will introduce him. So Governor David Patterson served as the New York State's 55th governor. He also served as New York State Senator himself, and is a former resident of Hempstead and a graduate of Hempstead High School. Our second host, Pastor Donnie McClurkin, who could not make it tonight. He's actually in the hospital, so we want to send our prayers to him and wish him a speedy recovery. So tonight, how the night will go. So as mentioned, I will be your moderator. My job is to keep the energy flowing and the conversation going, right? We're going to give the candidates a few minutes to introduce themselves. Tonight we have Trustee Carmen Pinheiro, we have Nassau County Legislator Sila Bino, and New York State Assemblywoman Taylor Darling. So as the evening goes, each candidate, we have, I believe it's 9 topic areas. Each candidate will be posed 1 question and have 3 minutes, 2.5 minutes for each question. They will, after their introduction. And that's pretty much how the night will go. And
I'm going to ask the people in the booth if you can bring the house lights down just a little bit so that there's enough light that's on the stage. And ladies and gentlemen, a conversation in the corridor that counts. Give them a hand, please.
As we begin, I do want to present our questioners. We have 3 fabulous questioners that will be asking tonight's questions. The first one is Dr. Sandra Castro, who is Associate Dean for Undergraduate Program in the College of Professional and Continuing Studies, and Adjunct Professor in the Department of Sociology at Adelphi University. We have Dr. Mufti Farhan, who's the Executive Director of the Islamic Center of Long Island in Westbury. He is also the co-founder and chairperson of a nonprofit called Children of Adam. And our third questioner will be Governor Patterson, who is now arriving. We'll give him a few minutes. Where's my question?
Well, thank you all. I apologize for being late. The person who gave me directions used to work for General Custer. So, on with the debate.
Okay, the first question is going to be asked by Dr. Farhan on housing. Once the question is asked, we will start with Legislator Bino and go in this order. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, I forgot the introductions. 3 minutes for introductions, so we can start with Legislator Bino.
Thank you. So I'd like to first start by thanking TCC and all who will be a part of this program this evening for hosting this event. My name is Sheila Bino. I am a first-generation American. My grandfather came here to this country from St. Kitts Nevis, and he was an elevator operator. My grandmother from Anguilla, and she was a domestic. My father came here from Suriname, South America, where they speak Spanish and Dutch. But he came here, and he worked for MTA and had a second job while learning to speak English. My mother worked full-time, went to school, and was raising her family. I learned from them that with prayer, with hard work and perseverance, you can achieve your dreams. You can get up and shake yourself off when there are disappointments and stay focused on the prize. After graduating Westbury High School, I too worked full-time and went to college. I achieved my associate's degree right here from Nassau Community College, went on to Hofstra University and then to Long Island University. I've worked here for the last 24 years in housing on Long Island in the region, from Long Island Housing Partnership, where I advanced and administered the down payment assistance program, to working with housing authorities, where we invested over $40 million in housing stock here on Long Island. I had a bout with cancer, and it was that earlier lessons from my family that made me realize I could persevere, I could get through it. And it was after getting through that experience that I realized I wanted to dedicate my life to service. So aside from serving in housing, I served the Westbury School Board.
30 seconds.
I went on to serve as a legislator for the last 10 years, and in that role, I have been able to do quite a few things in a bipartisan manner, using collaboration and pragmatic methods to ensure that the quality of life here in Nassau County and Legislative District 2 was enriched. Thank you.
Next, we have trustee Carmen Pinheiro, 3 minutes.
Good evening. Is my mic on? Oh, okay. Good evening. I would like to begin by saying thank you to TCC and to the esteemed panel here for putting this together. Thank you to my fellow colleagues in government, Sila Bino and Taylor Darling, for their service. I'm an immigrant. I came to the United States at the young age of 10 from Dominican Republic. Both of my parents were members of unions, the garment district unions. They worked very hard. My father specifically taught me that education is the equalizer. Education opens so many doors, not only for myself, but for my siblings, and for many other community members, residents, and people from all walks of life that come to this great nation. I'm a proud product of the Freeport School District. I went from 6th grade all the way to graduating in high school, where I saw firsthand the needs of our communities. I remember being a young 12-year-old Carmen Pinheiro walking the streets of Freeport, walking through Sunrise Highway during the crack pandemic. I don't think people realize what we as members of the corridor have seen as young children. The lesson that I learned was that back then, being a crack addict, you were a criminal. Fast forward to now, we have an opiate crisis. The difference between when I was growing up and seeing members of my communities on the street to now is that there's service. There are healthcare centers to help them not be criminalized. So I went to Loyola College on a scholarship for lacrosse and academic. I remember making a promise to my high school coach, Diane Wallers, that I would come back to Freeport to give back to those that helped me make it. So I came back to Freeport from graduating Loyola in 1998 and coached the Junior Lady Devils lacrosse program for 6 years. And I have to tell you, I am smiling because those young ladies are now doctors, lawyers, police officers.
30 seconds.
And at that time, members of the community came to me and said, Carmen, you need to run for school board. I ran for school board, became the youngest and the first Afro-Latina elected to the Freeport Board of Education, where I served from 2002 to 2011. In 2009, I got elected as the first female trustee of African descent to the Freeport Village Board from 2009 to 2011, where I served as deputy mayor for some terms. In addition to that, I was also school board president. I work for the State Assembly, where I see that the budget hasn't been passed yet, and we see firsthand how when government fails us, it's a trickle-down effect, because it affects the budgets for our school districts, it affects local government and how they will deliver. I look forward to working with each of you, and I look forward to working with my colleagues here in government, but also I look forward to getting my message to you so I can get your vote. Thank you.
And our third candidate, New York State Assemblywoman Taylor Darling, 3 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Is live? Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Assemblymember Taylor Darling, and I've proudly been serving you all since 2019. I was originally born in Brooklyn to two incredible parents who invested in my education and had a passion for law. My father was a veteran. He became ill, and we moved back to the United States. And then shortly after that, he died. So we moved out to Long Island so that we could heal and start a new life and move from Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. Uniondale was very good to my family and I, so good in fact that I was able to graduate from high school at the age of 16 and attend Spelman College. Today is Spelman's Founders Day, so we're really excited about that. And I immediately entered a doctoral program once I turned 19 and graduated early from Spelman. But again, my mother became ill, so I moved back to New York from Georgia, and I wasn't in love with the community that I returned to. And I said, I know how hard we all work. I know what these taxes look like, and I just was not seeing that reinvestment in our community. So that seed was planted, and my mother later died. I stayed in the private sector, and in 2018, I was called to serve. I was called to bring all of my analytical skills, my ability to strategize, and my ability to deliver to the people that invested in me. And we have been serving, and by we I mean myself and Team Excellence, because I cannot do this by myself, but we have solved a lot of issues that plagued our community and hindered growth. We have delivered millions of dollars, and we have really just been a voice to say, Long Island matters, we're here, we're not all rich, we have needs, and we mentioned the budget. It is late. The speaker has called us to come back to Albany, so unfortunately I'll be traveling 177 miles tonight, so I won't be able to stay the entire time, but getting this budget passed is important because there are financial ramifications, like my colleagues just mentioned. We want to make sure that we pass a balanced, fair, and it's no longer on time, but a budget, and we are fighting. We're fighting for these education dollars. We're fighting to make sure that Long Island, again, receives its fair share, and it is difficult because the Long Island representatives in the majority have dwindled. So we have a lot of work to do, and that means that our voices have to be even stronger. So when this opportunity came to run for higher office, we wanted to make sure we had someone who was here, who has the relationships built, who can hit the ground running. Because if you don't know the landscape of Albany, that can cost you money, and that can cost you a lot of progress. And we're here for progress. And I just want to thank the community for coming out. This is how every room should look.
30
and thank you,
seconds.
TCC, for ensuring that we know who our candidates are, and we have these spaces because they're important and you matter. And I look forward to delivering for you all even more in the Senate. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those amazing introductions, and now we will start with our questions. First question is on housing, and it will be presented by Brother Farhan.
Good evening, everyone. My question is, if elected, how would you propose legislation to address Nassau County's high cost of living, which often lead to mortgage struggles and even homelessness? This includes permitting homeowners to rent out basement apartments, garages, or backyard cottages after passing requisite inspections. Additionally, how would you tackle the issue of limited affordable housing, causing many individuals in their 20s and 30s to live with their parents, and promoting a potential mass exodus to other states, impacting tax revenue? Would you consider legislation to address municipalities' unrestricted power to restrict development, particularly in building additional homes, and possibly implement measures such as assisted living centers to alleviate the housing shortage for seniors?
We'll start with Legislator Bino.
Keep talking, Gerard, keep talking.
Hello?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So, as stated earlier,
It's not on.
Sila.
Come here.
it's on.
See?
Shut down.
It is on. Can I reclaim my time?
Two and a half minutes.
So as stated during the introduction, I've worked in housing for 24 years. I also, as stated, live in the village of Westbury. I have witnessed how the mayor and its trustees and the community have rallied around the development of new housing. We are just in the midst of rezoning just across from the train station for additional housing. I believe that housing can be built and should be built for a range of different individuals. But I don't believe that you can drag people along. I believe that if you try to usurp local governments in their ability to decide what gets built, when it gets built, we will end up in long battles of lawsuits and will stifle growth. As a legislator, I was able to introduce legislation to ensure that we created a land bank. And that land bank goes out into the community and it picks up blighted properties, vacant homes, and vacant land that's blighted. And then we rehabilitate or we build new. And we turn those houses over to first-time home buyers. Additionally, as a administrator of a down payment assistance program, I can tell you firsthand that if we look at that program and we have a statewide program which will infuse the local regional community with the ability to put down payments down, have assistance, we can turn the corner on some of this shortage of housing. We have tons, I'm sure you all see them just like I do. When you drive through communities, there's vacant, blighted land. Additionally, I believe that we should be looking at opportunities, right, to infuse the community with low-income tax credits. Right now, there's a statewide program. I believe that we're underutilizing that program to be able to streamline the process to the extent that we can build and build quicker. There's opportunities here. I think we're squandering the ones that exist, and I would hate to see us get into legal battles and stifle the ability for the growth here in Nassau County and through the region. Thank you.
Trustee Piñeros.
Housing. Housing is something dear to me because you see, 24 years ago I was able to buy my house, but that's not the case for the young adults that are graduating college right now. They're actually thinking of leaving. So we're going to continue to lose those bright students that we invest in public education, those bright students that are going to be the next leaders of our community. I've been in the mortgage industry for over 25 years. And as an elected official in the village of Freeport and member of the National Association of Latino Elected Officials, we were able to lobby in Congress through FHA. You see, there's a lot of programs at the federal level that sometimes the information doesn't trickle down to our communities. Right here in New York State, we have Sony May. Sony May is an amazing program that allows for low-income members of the community to obtain low-interest rate loans to buy their starter homes. The problem that we have nowadays is that our senior population is holding on to the properties because there's not affordable housing, meaning apartments that they can live to. See, our seniors are older. It's harder for them to maintain their properties. It's harder for them to live cohesively. But if we have, because you have assisted living communities, but half of our seniors can't afford it. They can't afford it. Unless they sell their properties for over $500,000, and sometimes it doesn't even make a cut. If we pair new housing, right, we find the buildings that are being abandoned, that have been a blight in our communities. If we go, I give you an example, right now in Freeport on Buffalo Avenue, which was a very heated discussion in our community, the old Maxie Rigby development is being rebuilt to house for veterans, for seniors,
30 seconds.
and for low-income communities. So what we need to do is we need to look at the overall picture, as you mentioned, of affordability, but also for us, the middle class homeowners. We're struggling too. We are the backbones of all the communities. And right now, inflation, high interest rates are a burden to all of us. And we need to find a solution, if not from the federal government, from the state government, to have those interest rates for first-time home buyers be available for refinance for those members of the community that need it. Thank you.
Assemblywoman Taylor.
Are we standing or sitting?
You can, whatever you're comfortable doing.
Okay, so
2.5
I've given
minutes.
housing a lot of thought, and we've been working with housing organizations to run a plan that we created by them, and the big plan is that pathway to home ownership. When we say the word affordable housing, a lot of communities in Long Island get very scared because guess what? Housing is not affordable for any of us here. So that gives people an impression of what their community could or could not become. And I said, I don't want to continue to encourage tenants. We know that home ownership is one of those vehicles to build generational wealth. And many people who moved out here were able to purchase additional homes and use that as rental income. So in our pathway to home ownership, in an ideal world, it would address the young people who go to college and come back home and can't afford to purchase homes and they're living in their parents' basement. It would give us some micro housing near the train stations that they'd be able to live in, and there'd be programs that would work with them to help them become very strong candidates for home ownership along the way. In the middle of that pathway to home ownership, we would have a program for the middle class who may have saved up enough for down payment and closing costs and maybe want to purchase additional homes so that people who may not be ready to purchase in our community can rent those homes. And then at the end of that pathway to home ownership, we would want senior housing. We have to address the senior housing. Trustee Pinheiro just said it. Seniors are holding on to 4 or 5 bedroom homes that they don't need because it's too inexpensive to downgrade. So we would create affordable senior housing so that they would feel comfortable leaving their family homes but staying in the community where their children and their churches and everything is, and we don't have to deal with that exodus. So along that whole pathway to home ownership, we are working with programs, we are working with our federal partners, of course our state partners, and of course we are also working with our local governments because we cannot build out here without the guidance from our local governments. When you build and when you have more people coming, that means potential congestion. That means a strain on our sewers, our water, our educational system. So we have to be good partners because we don't want to solve one problem and create 10 more. We want to have a great quality of life. This is the suburbs. We would like it to be the suburbs. We would like our space. We would like our beautiful homes. But I definitely think that there's more work that we can do. And I feel very confident that that pathway to home ownership is the answer because people can eventually own homes.
Thank you. Our next topic is on policing. The question will be presented by Brother Farhan as well.
Thank you for the answers. According to Long Island's United most recent monitoring report of police reform in Nassau County, the Nassau County police are 2 to 5 times more likely to arrest black people, 2 to 4 more times more likely to stop a black pedestrian than a white pedestrian, and 3 to 7 times more likely to use physical force against black residents than white residents. The reports also share that there is over-policing in many of the corridor communities. These numbers have not changed based on any of the reforms the police say they have enacted. Other than diversity recruitment, training, and body cams, can you share your thoughts on other possible solutions that can be enacted at the state level? Can you reference a proposal from the People's Plan that might help in this area?
We will start with Assemblywoman Taylor.
We're gonna move that way? Okay, that's a really good question. One of the most important bills that I passed in New York State was the Dante Wright bill. And for those not familiar with that story, he was pulled over because he had, things hanging from his rearview mirror, and we wanted to make sure that that would be a secondary reason that people would be pulled over, because we do know that our communities usually are over-policed. And right now where we are with policing, it feels like we're attacking this system that was built to be unjust by making piecemeal laws to protect us. And what I get to do in Nassau County is be a good partner with the police, make sure that we get to know each other, they get to know our communities, let them know that they do have a representative here that people can rely on and turn to. And honestly, the problem is so deep-rooted because we're so segregated here in Long Island. So people do not have familiarity with people from different backgrounds. So I just recently met someone who said their girlfriend never met or spoke to an African American person until she was in high school in Massapequa. So if you don't know each other, there's no way you're going to be able to understand each other, one, and then two, you're left to depend on the narratives that may be coming from very biased viewpoints. So what I plan to do, if elected into the Senate, is to ensure that we're bridge building through these communities. And I support initiatives like ride-alongs, adopt a classroom or adopt a cop. You know, I think there's like coffee with a cop. There are a lot of initiatives that I have to say the village of Freeport and the village of Hempstead consistently take part in National Night Out, spaces to allow police to get to know the community, to allow the police to be part of community advancement initiatives as opposed to policing, because we know that when we get to know each other and we're able to put people to race or religion or gender, that a lot of these responses that come from fear and the unknown are eradicated. So that is my plan, to continue to bridge these gaps, continue to really look and examine laws that passed over our desks to see how we can fix an issue that honestly is doing what it said it's to do. The policing in our community is the result of disenfranchisement, it's the result of prejudice, it's the result of racism. So to get to that deep-rooted point, we have to get to know each other, and that's really been my big focus since I've been in office.
Trustee Pinheiro?
Policing.
It's good.
Keep talking.
I think, okay. Policing is a major issue. Racial profiling is not only here in Nassau County, it's actually throughout the state of New York. If given the opportunity to be your next state senator, we need to look at the state laws from the top down. The issue that we have is that we try to piecemeal and fix it. So, for example, a misdemeanor in upstate New York is considered a felony in downstate New York. So you have throughout the state of New York certain municipalities, certain counties that view a tinted window as a misdemeanor. Other communities, I'm using it as an example, view it as a felony. So that's the first problem that we have. But furthermore, we also need to take a look at the Nassau County Civil Service, the testing for police officers. We need to see why is it that there's a large number of Black and brown and people of color that don't make it while taking the tests. Because the test is geared to weed out a lot of folks, but in the process, it weed out the people that look like you and me. And if we don't have police officers that look like you and me in the force, we can try to educate, we can try to do adopt a cop. And I have to tell you, as a trustee in the village of Freeport, and before I became a trustee, as a 16-year-old, I worked with Chief Woodward, who was the chief of police in the Freeport School District at that time, to create, at that time, the gang prevention panel. I worked closely with Strong Youth, Sir Yorgetta at that time, because we had the incidents of gang activity. But what happened was, there was a disconnect between our police force and our community. You know, you have members of different racial backgrounds that come here and they're scared of the police, so they will not collaborate. And lastly, by fixing the testing at the county level, right, and making it more open and accessible, and also seeing in the academy what is that is forcing certain officers to not pass the psychological aspect of those testing, then we're going to start seeing a larger number of police officers, female, male, that look like you and me in the force, and we're going to start seeing the diminished amount of the frisk and stop for folks in our community.
Legislator Bino?
Thank you. So when I first was elected to Nassau County Legislature, I was looking at stats which weren't readily available, and one of the things that popped out at me was that far too often, individuals who were in mental health crises ended up in jail. And so in looking at that, I went and I spoke with the commissioner of the time, and I asked, how are we training our officers to respond to mental health issues? And he was kind enough to have the commanding officer come and meet with me, and when he came in, he had all these books, and I was really impressed with the number of books he was carrying. But I said, listen, let me just ask you one question. Is the information in that book evidence-based? And he looked at me and said, huh? And then I said, and who's teaching this course? An officer who's not trained in mental health himself. And so one of the first things I did was make sure that we had in place mental health first aid training, evidence-based, provided by a certified individual to train the cadets in the academy. Step 2, make sure that the police officers who are already in service come back in and get trained in mental health first aid. Step 3, after watching that murder of George Floyd on video, make sure that we conduct a study to ensure that we utilize all of the resources available to us. And so when we conducted the study, a law that passed in a bipartisan fashion, introduced by me, and initially I did get the question, are you attempting to defund the police? Nonetheless, my Republican colleagues passed it unanimously.
30 seconds.
And that study allowed us to embed mental health professionals into mental health related 911 calls. The number of individuals who are suffering in our communities has gone down. Now, we know there's more to be done. We need to create spaces where the police can take those individuals so that they can get the care they need other than the hospital. That's the next step. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next topic area is reproductive rights, and the question will be presented by Governor Patterson.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, candidates. If we think about women's reproductive rights and the reversal of the Roe v. Wade decision last year, and once again, a voice of freedom has been shut down. There has been an additional situation that's occurred in the last 72 hours when a court in the state of Arizona has now struck down all abortions, all of them, with the exception of the fact that the woman's life might be in danger, which is a decision that could go either way depending on who's treating her. And so my question to all of you in this point where we're all under siege in trying to provide rights for the women of our country, our state, and right here in this community, what your plan is to try to protect the freedoms we still have.
Legislator Bino.
So yes, a woman should have, it's her body, her choice. She should have the ability, with the free will given to her, to make the decision. Not the insurance company, not elected officials. She makes that decision. And I would protect that right. I would protect that right with all that I have. But I'm going to go one step further when it comes to reproductive health. And I want to address that not only should we protect the woman's right, we should protect women who are pregnant who are dying, and the children are dying in record numbers. Maternal mortality here in Nassau County is higher, the rate is higher than the Bronx. Why? That shouldn't be. We need to protect every woman's ability to bear a child and be able to do so without the disparities that they're meeting in these healthcare institutions. So I introduced legislation here in Nassau County for the purpose of studying why, no matter your socioeconomics, no matter your job status, no matter your insurance status, women from this corridor tend to die in childbirth or their children die. And so this is what we need to be doing every day. We need to be protecting women's reproductive health. We need to be able to ensure that everyone has access to medical care and information. We need to make sure that our young people who are not ready maybe to have children have information that allows them to access contraception. They're able to have information about their reproductive health.
30 seconds.
We, as a state, can do better than what we're doing in this very moment. So yes, let's protect a woman's right to choose. Let's protect those women who want to bear children, and let's protect our babies. Thank you.
Trustee Pinheiro.
Protecting the woman's right is actually protecting the family, because the woman is the unit of a family. As my colleague Sila Baino mentioned, the mortality rate in Nassau County, but also actually in the state of New York, when it comes to women of color, is over 80%. The issue that we have is that women of color, when they go to their doctors and they express certain concerns, they're not being listened to. They're being overlooked. When they tell them, I feel something, the baby doesn't feel right. Oh, you're just overreacting, the baby looks fine. To find out 3 months later that she has a stillborn baby in her womb. No mother should go through that. And I think it has a lot to do with the ignorance in healthcare. And what I mean by the ignorance in healthcare is that there are amazing doctors out there that take the time to know their patients, and then there are other that is just a mill. They come and they go. They come and they go. I mean, we all know Serena Williams in this room. And if you see her documentary about what she went through in childbirth, I have goosebumps right now. And that's Serena Williams. She has the means, she has the ways. What happens to the women that do not have access to the doctors that she had? So we need to take care not only of the women, we need to take care of the entire family, because if mom is not okay, the babies are not going to be okay. If the mom dies and she has an additional 2 children, now we're going to have orphans. And who's going to look out for them? I think that when we talk about women's right, we need to look at the overall picture. We need to see why in the first place are a woman's body being regulated. I had a conversation with a male colleague one time, and I said, what happens if we regulate you? What happens if we do a vasectomy, right, at age 16, and then when you're ready to have children, it's reversed? And he's like, that's not funny, Carmen. And I said, so now put yourself in the woman's shoes. And he was like, you know what, you're right. I'm not saying that's the answer. What I'm saying is we need to make sure that the policies and laws that are in place and that we actually went back from the 70s when women were dying in back alleys because they had no resources to do it. We don't go back to that time, because what happens is that children get hurt, women get hurt, a society as a whole gets hurt. Thank you.
Assemblywoman Taylor?
Okay, so a lot of these issues that we have in healthcare, criminal justice, education, again, they all stem from the fact that this country was built in a space where Black and brown people were considered less than. So that is why there's this huge misunderstanding, this barring of access to opportunities. We don't have as many doctors as we should have who come from our communities. And again, this is all by design. So some of the things that I've been really proud of that we've worked on in the Assembly would be codifying Roe versus Wade here in New York. The governor was very, very passionate about ensuring that happened, to the point where they're like, hey, if you need something, you can fly to New York or get something done if your state does not permit that. And I think it's just very important to have access so people are able to make the best choices for themselves and their families. I also want to speak about education. Education and awareness is very important. So I've supported Planned Parenthood and been supported by Planned Parenthood since 2018 when I ran in the first time, because we want to make sure that people do have access to accurate information and health care regardless of their ability to pay, or sometimes even parents restricting situations. I had a parent like that who was very conservative, and Planned Parenthood was very helpful here in Hempstead so that I could get answers and I was able to take care of myself in those spaces. And I want to just share a story. My Spelman sister was pregnant, and she was about 8 months pregnant, and we were in Georgia, and she decided to utilize a midwife because she wanted to make sure she had the care she needed as a Black woman and did not trust doctors. She was dropped off at my house, and she looked very, very pale, and her midwife instructed her to go and take a bath and take a nap. I knew something was very wrong, so we rushed her to the hospital, and they had to rush her into surgery because they could not find the baby's heartbeat. And now the baby was 8 months. It was almost considered full term. And, you know, I was 5 months pregnant with my first child at that time, so I was really excited. I'm calling her parents, and I'm like, guys, the baby's coming any minute, because I did not know that the infant mortality rate in this country was so high. And about, 40 minutes later, a doctor comes out and says they were able to save her. And I said, save her? And they said, but they were not able to save the baby. So I was able to hold a dead baby, my godchild, for the first time. And it was in that moment that I realized we are treated very different. Black women are treated very different. Our pain tolerance is not understood by so many, and it is because of that that I stand with so many mothers in the Assembly right now, always eager to support any packages of legislation that we can use to, again, try to fix a problem from the outside that is deep-rooted. It's very deep-rooted, and the way we get through that is by, once again, education, getting to know each other, and bridge building. And that is what I plan to continue doing, building bridges so people don't have to operate in ignorance.
Our next topic area is healthcare, and the question will be presented by Governor Patterson.
Right now, the available hospitals in New York State are under siege. Most of them are in debt, and a number of them are going into that place. Now, in the past, the state has stepped in and saved particular hospitals, as it did in the 80s and 90s, but this seems to have lost the ability of the legislature that's there now and the agencies to address this type of a problem. When we have a situation in hospitals where where children born to minority parents are, their mortality rate is higher than almost all of the developing countries around the world. And when we have a situation where the excess hospitalization, where people have to be moved out of hospitals to move others in, is really just like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. It's not going to solve the healthcare problem. I'm not saying that any one of you could solve the problem, but certainly you must have suggestions as to how we can persuade the executive branch and the legislative branch to do a better job with the health facilities in our neighborhoods.
Assemblywoman Taylor.
Thank you, Governor, for bringing that up, because that is really the fight that I'm currently in up until today, texting with Ways and Means, because we are fighting to not only save Nassau University Medical Center, we are fighting to ensure that we can stabilize it and it can start to be self-sustaining, because it is really a crazy environment for people to have to work in, to be concerned about their job every day. And that has been the case for decades. And I always wonder, what quality of care can you provide as a nurse, as a CNA, as a doctor, if you're not sure if your hospital is going to be open? And of course, once again, this is a hospital that serves primarily Black and brown communities, underinsured and uninsured individuals. So when I was elected in 2018, there was a formula where the hospital was receiving federal and state funds. The state funds were matched by federal funds. And as soon as 2019 hit, everything stopped. And the hospital has been trying to recoup and trip ever since. So I have worked very closely with the hospital to ensure that, once again, people over profits, because there are hospital systems where I have had constituents say they walked into the hospital and they were not welcome in that hospital. They were refused in that hospital. And if we have a community where many people do use the ER as their primary care, their primary care access, we want to make sure that these are hospitals that are first letting us in, that they're hospitals where the healthcare professionals are representative of that community, and that the hospital is not concerned about trying to make a dollar out of 15 cents. There's only one safety net hospital in Nassau County, one public hospital. It is a level 1 trauma center. It is a place that our first responders rely on. It employs 3,600 individuals. It supports all of the local businesses that are in that area. And we are going to continue to fight tooth and nail. And I am feeling really great about the fact that we can get them some funds so that they're able to make it to the end of the year, in addition to their reforms that they've put in place to ensure that they're able to be strong fiscally. Because if a hospital is concerned about making money, who is concerned about the care for those individuals? So we are fighting really, really, really hard, and we've made some really great progress. And what we're not going to allow is inactivity and fighting to get in the way of service. We are action figures, and we need actions, and we need solutions, long-term solutions that are going to ensure that hospital is able to thrive once again.
Legislator Bino.
Fully fund Medicaid. Fully fund Medicaid. We must reimburse the nursing skilled facilities and these public corporation hospitals fully. Additionally, we must look at a way where we can fund those hospitals with a permanent source of funding into the foreseeable future. Because what's happened to this point is that each time Nassau University Medical Center becomes really laden with these deficits, the state swoops in, the feds come in, and they give them temporary funding. So when the funding runs out, we're back in the same situation. Additionally, we have to get great leadership at that hospital. We have found time and time again that it is a patronage mill. It's a place for nepotism. Even staring down the barrel of a deficit, they decided to take a former embattled sheriff and give him over a $250,000 job. Are you kidding me? Additionally, we've got to, if we're going to take help from the state, we have to comply with the regulations that come along with the money. We have to be in compliance with that. Now, Nassau University Medical Center, I'm sure for all of us, we have a story, whether you were born there or your grandparent was cared for there. It's a Trauma One hospital. It is really the lifeline for communities that are in this Senate district. So yes, we have to fight hard. We have to fight tooth and nail. Additionally, I believe wholeheartedly in all of those folks who are serving there at the hospital. They were there for us in a time of uncertainty during COVID.
30 seconds.
It is now time for us to make the hard decisions and be there for them and be there for the community to which that hospital serves. Thank you.
Trustee Pinheiro.
Not only fund Medicaid, as you said, we need to look, so the 6th Senate District in Long Island, we send millions of dollars up to Albany and also to the federal government. But unfortunately, we do not get those funds back. And we need to fight to make sure we get those funds back so we can stabilize not only Nassau County Medical Center, but the other hospitals that are within communities that look like you and I. Because if we allow Nassau County Medical Hospital to fail, that means that over 1 million residents are not going to have access to health care. And that's a fact. We have to support the men and women that work in that hospital. I've had great conversations with some of them in the campaign trail. They're worried. And you know, I'm worried because, you know, God forbid I get into a car accident or I get sick or one of my loved ones gets sick and we get there and the staffing is not there, or they're so down that they're sick that they're not going to provide the care that we need. By funding Medicaid completely, it will not only give access to all of us as residents, but it will also ensure that the men and women that work in the hospital are getting paid. The problem that we have is that, as my colleague Sila Vaino mentioned, the patronage jobs, right? We need to make sure that we have check and balances and that we audit how are those funds that are brought in by the feds, by the state, being used. I can tell you that one of the major things that we need to make sure is that if X funding is to be allocated for the salaries of the hospital, well, let's make sure it's being used by the salaries of the hospital. If it's being used by equipment, then it's being used by equipment.
30
because
seconds.
what happens is the extra funds, they end up being the bonuses for the top administrators in the hospital, and it doesn't get reinvested in quality machinery, quality products inside the hospital, and medicine too that they get. And I wanted to add that a lot of people don't realize that Nassau County Medical Center is one of the few that has a mental health wing that addresses the disparity in mental health in this community. So if given the opportunity, I will fight to make sure that there's a permanent funding specifically allocated not only to Nassau County Medical Center, but the other public hospital in the state of New York. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next topic area will be childcare, and the question will be presented by Dr. Castro.
Good evening. Presently, the state only serves fewer than 20% of eligible children for subsidized childcare, leaving numerous families without essential support. Additionally, many childcare educators earn poverty wages, necessitating government assistance to make ends meet. Should the state be obligated to offer universal, free, high-quality childcare to all New York children while also ensuring that all childcare educators receive a living and thriving wage?
We'll start with Trustee Piñeros.
This is dear to me. You know, it's, we need to make sure that the funding is there. But I'll share this with you. Our child care providers here in Nassau County, specifically the 6th Senate District, can you believe that they're still getting paper checks to get paid. I mean, in 2024, they're still getting paper checks, and they're 3 months behind. So here we have the most precious job of childcare. The childcare centers that take care of your babies and my babies. Yet, they're providing care, they're providing food, they're providing nurturing, they're providing education, but they're 3 months behind receiving the paycheck, so their families are struggling. What happens if that check doesn't get in and they don't have enough funding for them to make that mortgage payment? I think that we need to make sure that our current government, okay, looks at why is it that there's no direct deposit for these providers? Why is it that they're 3 months behind? Furthermore, in allocating the funding for universal childcare, you have to make sure that once we have that funding, there's parameters and check and balances to make sure that each provider, if they have everything in order and they have provided, that they're getting those funds in a timely manner. Because if we do not have quality childcare, our children are hurt. Because I can tell you, if I'm worried about my child, I'm going to catch that train or I'm going to drive to work worry of what's going to happen to my child. And we've also seen the other side of things. When things are not provided properly, what happens to the children and what happens to the daycare. And that's another ways of the middle class working, because it provides women with that to become small business owners as child care providers. So if they start to just move away from it, what's going to happen to our local communities, and what's going to happen not only to the quality of life, but to the economic ways and means for those families to provide for themselves. So if given the opportunity, I make sure that we audit, we see where the funding is being used, but most importantly, hold accountable Nassau County DSS of why there's a 3 month behind payment for all the child care providers, and why to this A&H in 2024, they do not have direct deposit. Thank you.
Assemblywoman Taylor Darling.
Okay. Child care, to answer your question, yes, I support child care workers receiving a wage, a New York-alistic wage, so that they're able to keep their businesses open and they're able to, again, live in their communities, and they're able to provide for their own families as they're supporting us as we go into the workforce. This is 100% a workforce development issue. We have so many companies right now that are complaining about not having a solid workforce, but if we're concerned about our children and where they will be from birth to about 4, because we do have universal pre-K that we worked really hard to expand in the state of New York. People are not going to be able to go to work. People are not going to be able to pursue careers, and that just really has a trickle-down effect. So some things that we were able to do in the Assembly to support childcare efforts, in 2023, we approved a budget that made childcare more affordable for New York families by providing funding to expand state childcare programs, expanding the salaries of people who are eligible to receive those things. And it really made a huge difference in middle-class communities like ours, so that they were able to, again, resume careers after, the restrictions from the pandemic were lifted, because we had so many families who said, hey, the pandemic's here, I get to be home with my children and work. And they were able to say, look how much money I've saved, look how much I've been able to connect with my children, and I've been able to do these things. So many parents decided they were not going to return to the workforce because they wanted those experiences. And many local community child care providers, in-home child care providers, had to close during COVID because of those very things. Receiving the checks in paper, not having the proper enrollment, and the enrollment shifting from side to side. So we were able to help many child care providers during the pandemic and connect them with resources. But this is New York's probably largest workforce development problem, and until we really create a solid, sustainable system around childcare for all communities, this is going to continue to be an issue. But we have to ensure that people are able to have options to go to work and ensure their children do receive quality childcare.
Legislator Bino.
So childcare is like an age-old problem that we haven't been able to solve. I can remember even when I was a child, my mother would be hustling, bustling us off to relatives, and her and my dad would, have different shifts so that they could care for us. And so, I think we're in a unique and kind of stage in this whole process where there's a significant shortage in childcare workers. Folks would rather work in restaurants, fast food places, instead of caring for children. And I know that their heart is probably there. They want to care for children, they just can't afford to do it. When childcare workers are making roughly $32K a year, it's tough to stay in that industry. So yes, the state needs to do more. We need to subsidize the ability for parents to have a safe place to leave their children with safe and vetted workers so that they can go to work. And we can't afford not to make those investments because there are economic ramifications for not being able to provide safe and decent childcare. So yeah, I would 100% support moving forward with subsidizing childcare and making it accessible for every man and woman who wants to be able to go to work and have their children cared for. Thank you.
Our next topic area will be democracy and elections, presented by Governor Patterson.
Candidates, each of you has given this evening some very striking examples of how certain communities get divided from other communities, and once they're divided, separate is not equal, and we learned that years ago. And so what I want to talk to all three of you about tonight is this election and the voter turnout for this election. Because recently it's become clear that the county of Nassau, the town of Hempstead, that voting in our communities is down. In 2022, 72% of whites that voted in Nassau County, 72% of whites voted in Nassau County. Only 25% of African and Hispanic voters combined voted in that election. So we have a tremendous turnout here tonight. I mean, this is a great turnout, a rainy night, and you've got all these people here. I forgot to mention all of them friends of mine. And we really admire the effort that all of you are making. But as you run against each other, in one way, you're actually all going to be running for the same purpose, and that is to get people in our neighborhoods to turn away from their anxiety and their anger and go out and vote and change the world as Barack Obama did in 2008. So I guess after I said that, it's just easy for me to say, what do you think of that?
Taylor Downing.
Governor, I'm glad you brought that up. Since I was elected in 2018, we have made extreme progress when it comes to making voting as easy as possible, from changing primary dates so that people don't have to vote as much, because if we can't get you to 2 elections, getting you to 3 or 4 elections in a year is going to be even harder. Early voting, I voted for that, it passed, and it has been more convenient, not as successful as far as the turnout goes that we would like. Our mail-in ballot program and just a slew of other policy changes that we made to ensure that voter suppression is met at the head, to ensure that, again, the ease and convenience of voting is there. Now, that handles making voting easy. How do you handle voter turnout? Well, I would have to say the corridor counts definitely, with today's event, is doing exactly what needs to be done. They are marketing, they're ensuring that you get to meet your candidates, they're getting you excited about who can come and represent you in your community. And why is our voter turnout so low? Our voter turnout is super low because I feel our communities feel disengaged, they feel disconnected from the process. They don't feel like they see a return on their investment or that anyone cares and is there for them. So it comes from a space of, first we must educate. The other thing we must do is always be developing candidates to run for office. And people who want to support running for office. We developed very quickly on, from a conversation that we had, where someone said they could not find any qualified candidates to run in the 18th Assembly District. And the comment disgusted me because I knew that was not true. If we can pay these taxes, we can run for office. And you only have to be 18 and prove residency to run for office. So that was a deterrent. And also a mirror to how you really feel about this community. So we decided, once again, to be action figures. We developed a program called the Pipeline Project. And in that Pipeline Project, we teach you about government, we teach you how to run for office and how to support candidates running for office. The product was so good, Hofstra University asked us to bring it there, and people are asking for this time and time again. We've had people running for office because of that, and because of our race and how we lead. We are transparent with this process, which is usually shrouded in mystery because it's meant to keep us out. But we know that, guys, every single election counts. So everyone in here, please make sure you're bringing 10 people to the polls, because that is how municipalities determine which neighborhoods to pay attention to and which neighborhoods not to pay attention to. And it makes our jobs a lot harder when we don't show that we have a community that cares about our community enough to come out and vote. We have to vote in every single election. It is not an option because we are losing as a result of our very low voter turnout.
Trustee Pinheiro.
Elections and democracy. We need to begin by engaging our youth. So it starts by education. I remember 30 years ago when I was in high school, there was a class called Civic Engagement and Participation in Government. It made sure that the students found a campaign that they felt represented what they wanted to be when they were older. Fast forward to 2024, civic engagement in some school district no longer exists. Participation in government exists, but not to the level that will create excitement in our youth. One of the things that I've personally taken part of is engaging my 3 children, bringing them to the polls with me, assisting our seniors that either have disability issues or have any questions or don't understand the language clearly by being bilingual. Educating our community is first and foremost about the importance of why voting is the key to power and representation. Our youth today, some of them don't realize that many of our ancestors lost their lives to make sure we had the right to vote. Both of my parents in Dominican Republic were part of the 14th of June movement who threw out Trujillo, the worst dictator in Dominican history. And one of the reasons that they did that was because the disastrous murders, the lack of freedom of speech, they couldn't be part of that. But they knew that it would take a set of women and men collectively together with members of the community to overthrow him.
30 seconds.
And lastly, what did I learn from that lesson? The lesson learned is, if you truly want freedom, there's 3 things to freedom: education, love, and the fight within to make sure that it happens. You cannot sit in front of a television and say, well, I don't like that guy, but you don't go vote and you stay sitting. You cannot sit home and say, well, I don't like any of the candidates running. Well, guess what? The other 70% is going to make that choice for you. So what we need to do is to make sure we take our youth, continue to engage them and teach them and pair them with our elders, with our seniors, so they can learn why the importance of voting and civic engagement is important. It's not only about making money, it's about making sure that we have the right people at the table where the decisions are made that is going to affect you and I. Thank you.
Legislator Bino.
Thank you. So I couldn't be more optimistic now than ever regarding voter turnout. It's this room, it's the energy, and it's coming right out of a congressional District 3 race where on a blizzard, in the heat of the winter, well, the cold of the winter, folks came out and voted. The numbers for the turnout based on a special election in February were extraordinarily high, extraordinarily high. And so I think that the unfortunate divisiveness of the current national scene that's actually plaguing our even county scene is going to inspire people. But we can't take that for granted that they'll just come. They won't just come. We, as elected officials, have to, in many cases, rise above much of that to be able to deliver for our communities. Be able to, like in the last session, I was able to negotiate with the legislature to bring $69 million to Legislative District 2 for the purpose of improving its infrastructure. It's when you deliver for your communities, your community will show up for you. It's when you're in your communities and you're at the door or you're at the supermarket and you're getting your to-do list. It's when your work is the product of the cries and the concerns of the community.
30 seconds.
And I would be remiss, and I won't leave out our young people because I 100% agree with you. We have to engage our youth. We have to get them involved in the process. And so that's why I do paid internships, because they're not gonna come for free. Paid internships, and that's why I do shadowing and mock legislative sessions in the chambers on a regular basis so that we can engage our young people and allow them to see their government at work. Thank you.
Our next topic area is education, and it will be presented by Brother Farhan.
So with regards to education, there are many issues regarding education across the entire state. Financial education, universal pre-K, special education, adult education, affordable higher education, lack of education with regards to inclusivity and minors, people of color, and things with regards to their backgrounds. Can you give us some specific details on how you would prioritize funding and expand services and access education for these various aspects of education?
We'll start with Assemblywoman Taylor.
So education is exactly why I decided to enter the realm of public service. One of our school districts was really suffering for years and years, decades even, and I found out that they did not have access to district-wide busing. And I know that education being one of the most important vehicles for opportunities and advancement and building generational wealth, if we're not able to ensure our children get to school safe, they're already at a disadvantage. So we had children walking up to 3 miles to school and 3 miles from school every single day in a community where there's high traffic, there was gang activity, and Oftentimes, they were not dressed appropriately for the weather. So the last 5 years of my life, that's been my driving issue. And I'm happy to report that we were able to allocate $1 million for the first purchase of buses, and it was approved by the school board so these children could get to school. That's the first step in educating them, is they have to be there and they have to be safe and they have to be fed. Other initiatives that we've had throughout education was investing in universal pre-K. You know, statistics have shown that the earlier we're able to get our children into these programs, the better the outcomes will be for their education. And as someone who went to college at 16 and had parents that instilled education in everything that I did, I do know what it means and what it takes to invest in a community to ensure we have the best outcomes. So that was very important as well. And again, continuing to support our schools, continuing to support our educators, continuing to make sure that they have the best environment so that they're able to, again, focus on the task of educating our children. And to know that so many of our communities are dealing with very different statistics than these surrounding communities. I mean, we literally share land with a school district that had some of the worst outcomes and some school districts that's some of the best in the country. And we're dealing with that because of redlining and ensuring that our resources, right? Our resources are always limited. Our classrooms are always going to be more full, and we're not going to always have access to those resources that will ensure, once again, those positive outcomes. So I have been a champion of education. I've been a champion for teachers, and I've been a champion to ensure that anything that I see that could potentially continue to keep individuals disenfranchised is addressed immediately, and it really does start with education. And right now we are negotiating, we came in with a three-way agreement to ensure that an additional $400 million is put in the budget for education this year, as it was taken out because we're in a deficit. And we said that's not where you're going to cut for New York State.
Moving on to Legislator Bino.
So I believe that educating the students, the young scholars, it starts before they hit the door of a school district, before there's a universal pre-K. It's an early intervention. It's when there is a developmental delay in the child when they're from 0 to 3 years old. I don't think that we do enough to make sure that first-time parents are aware of what services are available and also what signs to look for if there's a developmental delay. So far too often, a child goes undiagnosed, untreated, and they show up at the school district, and then they're unfortunately put into an IEP, and then there's a cycle. The child becomes uninvolved, disengaged, and we can stop that bleed very early. And it starts also because we're underpaying those same individuals who provide the service, so they don't come to our community to give the service. We have to increase the amount of money that we're paying for those services by way of the state budget. It's a requirement. Additionally, we have to fully fund the schools, and we have to do it in a way that allows them to go through the budget process and make really great decisions for our young people. The other thing is, in fully funding the schools, we've got to get the charter school out of the public schools budget. We have to fund the public school. We are robbing our young people from an ability to be able to actualize and optimize and compete when we do not provide the funding as it should be.
30 seconds.
The other thing is, our young people are suffering. They're suffering. We're suffering. The adults are suffering after the effects of the pandemic. We have to push in more mental health, more supportive services to our young people so that they can not only recover the education experience that they lost, but the social experience and be as available to opportunities to learn as possible. So I think that this is the right way forward, and I think that the state has a real ability here to turn, to make a correction here and make a turn for the right reason at the right time. Thank you.
And we'll close out the topic with Trustee Pinheiro.
So as I mentioned before, education is dear to me. Education is the equalizer. Education is the equalizer. It gives an even platform. One of the things in the late 70s, early 80s, the state of New York used to have a stock transfer tax on Wall Street. Those funds were specifically spearheaded for education only. So the funds that came in from the sales of all the stocks went into a general fund and specifically geared for school funding. That no longer exists. What is the difference? The funds in the late 70s and early 80s used to allow the state to provide 60% of the funding to all of the public schools in the state of New York. Fast forward to now, we barely are getting 15 to 20% of state aid funding. What does that do? It forces local school board districts to increase the property taxes, the school tax, which in turn hurts all of us, which is the middle class. And we can no longer here in Nassau County afford it. So what do we need to do? We need to go back and make sure that we see, because supposedly the lottery is supposed to be allocated for public education. So, but the funds from the lottery is being put in the general fund in the state, and the local school district do not see those funds. So we need to do an audit to see where the funding is being used, but also as elected officials and as members, we need to think outside of the box. I can tell you that I am excited to tell you that in my tenure in the Freeport School District, we went from not having universal pre-K to implementing universal pre-K before the state of New York made it a mandate. I think that local communities can determine what happens in their communities. But we also need to support the members of the school district that get elected to office and are thinking outside of the box. In adding to education, the seal of biliteracy was something that I fought in the Freeport School District. I didn't get to see it implemented, but I fought for it together with the late Assemblywoman Carmen Arroyo when I used to be Chief of Staff for Assembly Deputy Speaker Phil Ramos. So what happens? A generation, a decade of student lost in having the seal of biliteracy. The seal of biliteracy, what it does is it gives our student the opportunity to, one, they speak English, French, Creole, Spanish, Italian, to be at it and get tested. So what I'm trying to tell you is we need to think outside of the box, and we need to see what are the avenues that our children are not seeing, but also pair together with the pediatricians that are seeing our children from birth to 3 years old, because they are the ones that know what are the needs that the students are going to need, and pair them with the school district so they can receive the services. So as Legislator Biden mentioned, they are not falling behind or are behind when they get to pre-K in the school district.
Our next topic area is workers' rights, presented by Dr. Castro.
Thank you. So my question is about workers' rights. We know that the immigrant workforce is the backbone of our economy, especially in New York. They risk their lives and at times tragically lose their lives while doing their jobs due to unforeseen circumstances or due to employer abuse or neglect. The recent loss of immigrant workers from El Salvador, Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras in the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore accident is one of many examples of immigrant workers losing their lives while doing their jobs. In New York, our unemployment insurance system currently excludes huge swaths of workers, especially Black, brown, and immigrant workers that I just mentioned, that are working in precarious, low-wage industries. The revenue-neutral unemployment bridge program currently in the state Senate, would provide unemployment compensation to an estimated 750,000 workers who are excluded from regular unemployment insurance because of the kind of work they do or their immigrant status. Example, freelancers, cash economy workers. Do you support this effort?
Legislator Bino.
So we remember when COVID first hit and people were forced to stay at home, and we needed to be able to find a way to allow people to keep the lights on and keep food in their refrigerators and on their kitchen tables. And there was an opening of unemployment insurance for all type of jobs that wouldn't have traditionally been able to access that that service. And so we know it can be done. We know that when we do it, it helps infuse the economy and helps to stabilize families. So we have to find a way to protect all workers, all workers. You know, just recently I was able to serve as a commissioner on a workers' rights board that was put together by Long Island Jobs for Justice, as it was related to a young man who was working at Starbucks. And as Starbucks is looking to unionize and looking for opportunities to have a collective bargaining unit protect them in their workspace, to make sure that there's safe workspaces and OSHA violations aren't going swept under the rug. They were then victims of anti-union tactics. So we find that when workers are in precarious situations and they stand up for themselves, they then become victims. And so we have to find a way to protect the rights of those who are in these jobs, especially those that are on front lines, whether it's in a Starbucks or on the side of a bridge, to make sure that they have all of the protections that would be needed as a worker. I just think it's a human right, right? It's a basic right. So I definitely support the idea of looking at opportunities where we might be able to help individuals who would not necessarily, just because of the nature of their job, be able to
30 seconds.
access. And as far as those that are laboring in our communities, that are doing the jobs that that sometimes aren't popular, we need them just as much as we need anyone else. So we need to protect their rights just as well as the rights of those that are traditionally employed. Thank you.
Trustee Pinheiro.
All workers' rights should be protected. When we look the other way, or when we create back alleys, policies and procedures, everyone hurts. Because I give you an example. If, unfortunate, the workers in the bridge that pass, let's use, for example, a worker that is working in a building and falls, doesn't have insurance, doesn't have access. He's going to end up in the hospital. We're going to end up paying for it. However, his family or her family are going to be at a disadvantage because now they're losing their breadwinner. And now we're going to have issues of affordability, and how is the family going to survive? We were able to do it during COVID. We were able to expand the access for workers to be protected when need be, but also the legislature, local government, we were able to do it when we passed the Green Light Bill. You know, it was a controversial bill, however, now into the state of New York with registration and everyone having to have insurance. I think that sometimes we get sidetracked by half of a percentage of negativity instead of looking at what the majority of the outcome is going to be. How are we all going to benefit to make sure that all the workers have the rights that they need, have the protection that they need? Because I can tell you, there are some jobs out there that I know many of us here will not do. So we have to make sure that those that are willing to take the risk, to take those jobs and do it, that's the least that we can do to provide that protection that they need. Thank you.
Assemblywoman Darling.
Again, we're dealing with people, profits over people. Immigrant work matters when companies and organizations that are not good players are concerned about their pockets. But when it comes time to take care of these same workers that, again, worked entirely throughout the pandemic, so many of my constituents are undocumented individuals and called on us for support because they were being treated like less than. And it's deplorable. There's a space right around the corner from the office that we have at 33 Front Street where I've had to stand with workers with LDFS because during the pandemic, these individuals were getting sick because they were dealing with hospital linens with God knows what on them. And these employers were not providing health care. They were not paying these individuals. It was a hostile work environment. And we've stood in front of Mercy Hospital about twice now because they do utilize that linen company because, again, they're able to keep their costs down because they are not taking care of their workers. So I continue to champion with 1199, with 32BJ. We can absolutely keep going because anywhere where you see immigrants or individuals of color or industries that are predominantly women and women of color, there's always this fight for the bare minimum as they oftentimes work the hardest. So those are things that we really focus on. So yes, I would 100% support that because their work is what keeps our community going. And these communities that benefit from that work oftentimes will forget that because exactly what Trustee Pinheiro said, these are jobs that a lot of people will not do. And we oftentimes will turn our backs on those very people who, again, keep our communities running. So ways that I've been able to support that within the Assembly was supporting the Green Light Bill. That was a hard bill to support as a Long Islander, even though those very people who opposed the Green Light Bill, which allowed undocumented individuals to get their driver's license so they could safely get to and from work, they were quick to say, okay, great, now I can have the people who work in my companies travel to work, but they fought us relentlessly on that bill, and that bill has saved lives because now people can be insured and people can get to and from work and take their children to school safely as they do work in this community. The other thing that we were able to support was the Dreamers Act to ensure that undocumented immigrants do have a pathway to gain an education because we want them to become citizens. We want them to be able to pay into the tax system and not have to hide underneath the cloak of employment, which they can always find, but they're not able to then access the benefits so that they can live the quality of life that they live. So again, I just think it's very hypocritical in a lot of cases that we accept a lot of these people who fight these laws employ undocumented individuals, but then we don't want to support them. So I will do my very best to continue to support immigrants in the Assembly.
Our last topic area of the night is criminal justice and violence. Question will be presented by Governor Patterson.
In the last 10 years, a study just came out that the areas of Hempstead, Uniondale, Roosevelt, and Freeport experienced 118 shootings, 60 of them fatal, while the surrounding other communities, such as Garden City and East Meadow, during this particular time, had 8 shootings. The institutional response to high crime is always more police, more arrests, longer sentences, and a whole bunch of things that don't do anything for the victims and very little for the perpetrators. There was a case in New York State in the early 1970s the State versus Cyril. The holding of the court was that incarceration never equals rehabilitation. And so in this period of time where the leadership in a lot of areas around here refuses continuously to recognize the causes of these types of situations, most of them occurring, by the way, between 3 p.m. and 7 p.m., which is also the same time periods where there's gang activity, drug use by teenagers, teenage suicide, underage sex by teenagers, and every other social ill occurs at this particular time. And these leaders have never looked at the opportunity to extend the school day, which actually would help a lot of the parents, many of them single parents, many of them receiving child care, so that they could work a full day and then go and pick up their children. What would be the solutions that you three candidates, who really have articulated some great points tonight, but what would you do to try to lower the crime rate in our communities?
We will start with Trustee Piñeros.
This hits home for me. In my tenure as a school board member and also as a trustee in the village of Freeport, I saw about 6 youth get killed. One, his second year of doctor school. Another young lady who was a sophomore. A rising basketball star. So I used to say to myself, what is going on with our youth? And it's opportunities. We invest more money in incarcerating our youth than educating our youth. If we took a third of the funds that we use to keep our youth in jail, okay, into reinvesting in education, after school program, work to force programs, academics. You know, not everyone is meant to be the next Michael Jordan or the next Serena Williams, but he could be the next great chess player. He could be the next, rocket scientist that goes to the moon. So we need to find the funds to advocate for our youth. And not only that, our churches, our non-for-profit organizations, we need to find the funding so we can make sure that they have the tools to engage the youth from the streets. I asked a young kid on Terrace Avenue as I was canvassing. It was 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a school day. Why are you out here? Oh, there's nothing for me to do in school. What do you mean there's nothing for you to do in school? Oh, I can't learn. I have a learning disability and they make fun of me. So I told them, so because you have a learning disability, you're allowing another person to make those decisions for you and to gear you in the wrong path. He's like, where were you when I was in 9th grade? And I said, well, unfortunately, I'm not from this community, but I'm here now. I said, it's okay to have a learning disability. I said, my youngest child has a learning disability. You got to take the weakest things that you have and make it into the positive things. Here was a young kid who lacked
30 seconds.
Who lacked leadership, who lacked someone to guide him. And I think that we need to make sure we use the resources that we have in our communities, which for time in and time out are our religious institutions, our non-for-profits, but we also have to take the time to go to the places that are uncomfortable to go to. You need to be walking the streets of Terrace Avenue as an elected official. You need to be walking, Columbia Street in Hempstead. You need to be walking on Rutland Avenue in Freeport. You know why? Because that's where you're going to find the answers to the solutions and making sure that our youth are not being lost to gun violence. And lastly, we need to make sure that Who is buying all these guns and giving access to? Okay? We need to find out who are the players, just like we had with the crack epidemic, right? Who are the players bringing the guns into our community and making them accessible to our children? And there was a bill in the assembly that had a serial number that needed to be dedicated to the bullets, to track them down to the manufacturers. And that's how we're going to find the culprits. And we're going to see the percentage of level of death in our communities diminish. Thank you.
Assemblywoman Darling.
It's opportunities, children who are properly invested in won't have time or the desire to pick up a gun, to be involved in gang activity. And again, this is why my push to ensure that our children arrive to school safe so they could not be recruited by groups who did not have their best interests at heart was so important. Because when you look at these communities that had only 8 shootings, those are communities with school districts operating at about 96%. Those are communities with oftentimes functioning 2-parent households. There are things that happen at the foundation of our children, our families, in the very, very beginning that once again can make them feel unsupported, where they will turn to violence. Very few people wake up and say, I'd like to be a murderer, I'd like to have a gun and shoot somebody. That is not what happens. But if they feel like they're forgotten and they feel like they're disenfranchised and they have no other options and they're fighting for limited resources or jobs that are on the streets, that's what they're doing. They're fighting over turf because they don't feel like they have the pathway for true economic development. And we have to ensure that our summer programs are actually employing our children. When you look at programs offered by the municipalities and you see the pictures of the children that they've hired for the summer, many of those children do not look like they live in our communities. So you're giving them things to do with our tax dollars, but you're barring our children from that access. And I'm going to say this, if you have a pathway to a promising future, most people will not disturb that. But if you do not have that pathway, and there are pockets all over our community, it's not just Hempstead, there are pockets all over our whole entire community that are having those experiences, then what are their options? And their options are to take matters into their own hands because they feel like nobody cares about them and no one is there for them. And I also want to speak about mentorship. We're a village. These children are our children. There was a time period where if something happened to a child in our community, it affected all of us. So this space where we're so consumed and so focused on ourselves as individuals, we've lost a lot. We need that community accountability to be there because these bullets do not have names and they do travel. And we want to make sure that we do see a decrease in this violence, but it has to come with true sustainable opportunities for our children. So I'm going to continue to invest in all of those opportunities, ensure that our schools are fully funded, ensure that we have after-school programs, ensure we have transportation to get to these programs. And that is the best way to combat this. You have to get to the cause of why this is happening, and it's because they have no hope. And that is so sad considering the resources that float around Nassau County.
Closing us out, Legislator Bino.
So, they talk about the school to prison pipeline. I'm going to talk about the crib to the prison pipeline. Again, it goes back to early intervention from the start. If we're not addressing the issues that a young person has before they even meet the doors of the school district, we have set them up for fail. So we have to address that. Number 2, I'm going to agree with mentorship. Uniondale School District has an MBK program, a My Brother's Keeper program, the Barack Obama My Brother's Keepers program. And that program pairs the young people with mentors, and they're out there doing the work of the community by wrapping around the young person and acting as a supplement. And they had a civic leader stand up the other day and talk about how she's engaging her mentee. And she said that her mentee says she feels like her whole day goes well when she gets up on time. And so what does the mentor do? She calls that child at 6 a.m. every morning to make sure she's up and she starts her day okay. It's that example times thousands and thousands that I think turns this around. We have to be able to pour into these young people. The big brothers, big sisters, they're in Westbury, they're in Hempstead, they're in Uniondale, they're doing the work. But yes, we have to find a way to fund these things. It's money. It's money. Brothers, big sisters came to me and they said, we need money. Instead of using county ARPA money for this anniversary party and some of the ways that we're utilizing the money, throwing it down the drain, let's put it in our young people. Let's invest in our communities.
30 seconds.
We need capital improvements and we need soft costs. And I think we turned the corner. Just right outside of here in North Hempstead, we were able, yet again, I'm going to invoke President Barack Obama, I'm going to say we, but it was before my time, the community built a Yes We Can center. And you can go there at any point in time during the week and you will see young people playing, studying, and engaged. And that's what we need to replicate from community to community. Thank you.
Carter communities, we did it. Give yourselves a round of applause. And can we get a round of applause for our candidates? And before you guys leave, we have a special closing. I invite Frederick Brewington and Sergio Argueta up to close us out.
Hi, baby.
Yo, Sergio.
What up, Fred?
Not much, except for we now know the corridor counts, right?
Fred, the corridor has always counted. It is counted by way of, we used to count by the way of just young people that perished in our communities or graduation rates that weren't quite the same level as other communities. We used to count by foreclosures and just drastic and painful things that seem to only happen in the corridor.
But now it's different.
It's gotta be different.
We make the decisions. We decide who's going to be the individuals that are going to represent us. And in the corridor, when the time comes and we need to be in charge, we take charge. These three women have stood here and showed you the quality that exists in the corridor, because the corridor does count.
The corridor will always count, but it only counts if each and every last one of you goes out and ensures that you bring along your neighbor, that you bring along anybody over the age of 18, that you let them know we cannot sit this particular election out. For the first time ever, the corridor has an opportunity to pick from not one, but not two, but three qualified, phenomenal women of color that come from the corridor.
And when the corridor stands shoulder to shoulder, people of color, black and brown, we stand that nobody can count the corridor out. Right now, there are people that are watching what's going on live stream. Hey, y'all. Take notice. We're making decisions right now. If you want something to happen, you gotta come through the corridor, because, say it with me, the corridor counts.
As I think about the beauty of what I'm witnessing It was 24 years ago that I graduated from this very same school, having served as student government president. Not because of what I learned here, but because of those streets of Hempstead where I learned how to survive. Where certain individuals, let's be real, let us all down. But guess what? It is up to us, every last one of us, because regardless of whether these sisters get, whichever one of these sisters gets into that office in November, let's be clear. They will need us then more than ever. And accountability must count. You want to know why? Because the corridor has to count.
And it does. So before you pack up, before you grab your coats, say hello to somebody you don't know. Say hello to your neighbor that you never met before. Because we are now at a time when we can ill afford to not know each other. Brothers and sisters, June is the primary. November is the election. And when we come together, nobody can stand against us.
And let's be clear, this is but the first of many events, because we have our eyes not just for the Senate, but there is a legislature at the local level. There are school boards at the local level.
And there's Congress.
There is Congress. Now more than ever, we need to make our voices clear. So to my brothers that are here, for far too long, our sisters have had to carry the burden. I am in awe of how many of you turned out. Brother Rich, salute to all the brothers here. We are going to put in some action steps so that brothers can rightfully reclaim leadership positions that are not only entrusted in us by the Almighty, but most importantly, by those children coming up behind us. So keep an ear out and an eye out for all of the events that we're going to be hosting, because ultimately, brother, the quarter counts.
Give them a hand. Give them a hand. Ladies, would you stand up, please? Would you stand up, please? Give them a hand. Our questioners, give them a hand. Razmia Zatar, give her a hand. Ladies and gentlemen, TCC, the quarter counts. TCC, the quarter counts. TCC, say it. You know it.